I didn't hear the words at first, I felt them. A small movement at the corner of my son's mouth. Barely a breath, but sharp enough to slice through the silverware clinking and the forced politeness around the table. I was reaching to touch Jason's arm, a gesture I'd made his entire life, when he leaned the slightest bit toward me and mouthed, "Trash belongs outside." For a moment, I wanted to believe I misread him, but then I saw the look that followed the quick flicker of satisfaction, the tightening of his jaw, as if he'd finally said something that would earn him a place at that table. Across from us, Donna Parker, my daughter-in-law Amber's mother, let out a small, pleased smirk. Richard Parker didn't bother hiding his amusement. Amber stared into her water glass, letting silence stand in for courage. My hand pulled back before my mind understood what was happening. I'd been talked over, dismissed, and minimized in that house before, but never by Jason so openly, so proudly, and in front of people who relished it. My husband, Daniel Lane, didn't ask what happened. He looked at me, read the truth in my face, and reached for my hand under the table, steady, warm, grounding. "Let's go," he murmured. I stood without a word. After 62 years of keeping peace, I knew when the peace no longer included me. Daniel rose beside me, shoulders set, as if he had been waiting for this moment far longer than I had. The room barely reacted. Donna arched a brow. Richard nodded once, distracted. Amber never looked up, and Jason, my boy, kept his eyes on his plate, already shrinking from the thing he'd created. We walked out quietly. The Parker home felt too bright, too warm, too satisfied with itself. Outside, Daniel kept hold of my hand. The night air stung, but not nearly as sharply as my son's whisper. Something inside me had cracked soft. Quiet. Inevitable. I just didn't yet know how far that crack would spread. Daniel and I drove home without speaking. The hum of the tires filled the car with a steadiness I clung to, gentler than anything I'd felt at that dinner table. The streetlights flicked across the windshield in quick, sharp flashes, reminders of how fast a single moment can split a life into a before and an after. Jason's whisper stayed with me, quieter now, but unchanged in meaning. The heaviness in my chest wasn't anger. It was something older. Something that had lived inside me far longer than I like to admit. Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't need to. His love had always lived in the spaces between words, in the way he watched my breathing more than my reactions. When we pulled into the driveway, our porch light clicked on automatically, warm and familiar, like a small reminder of the life we had built with careful choices and sacrifice. Inside, the quiet felt heavier. Daniel draped his jacket over a chair instead of the hook, a small sign that his thoughts were tangled too. I stood in the middle of the living room, fingers brushing my palm, still feeling the moment Jason refused to meet my eyes. My phone buzzed again and again. I finally looked. Amber, monthly transfer today. No greeting, no concern, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. Just expectation. I set the phone down without replying. I walked toward the small office Daniel and I rarely used. In the corner sat the old wooden desk, its bottom drawer always sticking a little. I knelt and pulled it open. Inside were the manila folders, years of them each labeled in my handwriting. On top lay the small notebook where I'd written every transfer, every promise, every "we'll pay you back." I didn't touch them. I simply closed the drawer, knowing they wouldn't stay untouched much longer. The phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It buzzed against the table in steady pulses, then sharper ones, like someone knocking without the courtesy of waiting. I let it go until the sound faded into the background. When I finally picked it up, I expected Jason's name, but it was Amber. Monthly transfer today. The same tone as always. flat, expectant. As if I were an autopay she controlled. Daniel looked up from his chair. Her again. Yes. What does she want? What she always wants. Another message arrived almost instantly. Jason said to remind you. The words didn't sting. They landed like something familiar, too familiar. A pattern I had fed for years under the name of love, duty, motherhood. Last night had torn the disguise off all of it. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Evelyn, whatever you're going to say, I'm here. His steadiness held me long enough for the noise in my head to quiet. I picked up the phone again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. And old habits pressed in keep the peace. Keep helping, keep stretching until they're comfortable and you're invisible. But peace was already gone. I typed 2 words, not anymore, and hit send. We didn't move. It felt like stepping out of a room I'd lived in for far too long. One I hadn't realized was slowly shrinking around me. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was true. Then the phone lit up again. A call from Jason. Then another. Then a long stream of messages. The vibration grew frantic, as if urgency could undo what I had finally done. I didn't pick it up. A soft alert pinged. An email. Automatic transfer attempt declined, authorization required. Amber had tried to schedule a recurring withdrawal in my name. I stared at the screen until Daniel rose and placed his hand on my shoulder. You finally said it. He murmured. I did. I walked down the hallway, leaving the phone trembling on the table behind me. The afternoon sun had just begun sliding across the living room floor when the knock came firm, careful. Not the kind that belonged to family. Daniel and I exchanged a look. He opened the door, and there stood our neighbor, Ruth Harding, holding a small plate under a sheet of foil, as though she needed an excuse to appear. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said softly. Daniel let her in. Ruth, a retired librarian with a gentle way of noticing everything, looked different today. Hesitant, almost uneasy. She perched on the edge of the sofa, smoothing her cardigan. I saw Jason's car here last night. He left quickly. I thought something might have happened. I nodded. Words felt heavier than useful. Ruth took a breath. Evelyn, there's something I need to tell you. I wasn't sure if I should, but after seeing his face last night, I think you deserve the truth. My fingers tightened. Go on. I was at a barbecue at the Hemsworths last month, she said carefully. Amber's parents were there. Some cousins, too. They were talking loudly, loud enough that I heard even when I wasn't trying to. Daniel shifted closer to me. Ruth continued, her voice dropping. They were discussing you, about how your monthly help kept them managing. One cousin asked what they'd do if it stopped. She paused, regret pulling at her expression. Amber's mother laughed. She said, Evelyn will never cut us off. She needs to feel useful. The words didn't surprise me. They confirmed something I had been refusing to name. Daniel muttered, unbelievable. Ruth hesitated again. Amber also joked about shaping Jason, making sure he listened to the right people. She winced. I hated repeating that. But after seeing him run out of here last night, I knew staying quiet would be worse. I let out a slow breath, the truth settling like something old finally given permission to surface. Thank you, Ruth. She touched my arm, gentle. You deserved better than the way they've spoken about you. When she left, the house felt quieter, but not uncertain. Not anymore. This silence had shape. It had proof. When Daniel closed the door behind Ruth, he didn't step away right away. He stood there with his hand still on the knob, shoulders drawn tight, as if steadying himself. When he finally turned toward me, something in his expression had shifted, less anger, more regret. Evelyn, he said quietly, sit with me a moment. He eased into the armchair across from me, moving slowly, deliberately. Daniel never rushed hard truths. He handled them the way he handled fragile things, careful, measured, aware of their weight. I folded my hands and waited. "There's something I should have told you years ago," he said. "About Jason." My stomach tightened. "What about him?" Daniel rubbed his thumb over his wedding ring, the habit he fell into whenever a memory unsettled him. "When he first started dating Amber, I pulled him aside. I told him he needed to treat you with respect, that the small jabs, the dismissive tone, it wasn't harmless. I felt my breath catch. And he told me I was overreacting." Daniel's jaw tightened. He said Amber's family was teaching him standards, that they understood success better than we did. And then he said, Daniel paused, voice thinning. He said you needed to toughen up. The words landed like something too familiar to be shocking, but painful all the same. "I should have told you then," Daniel continued, "but I didn't want to hurt you. And I kept thinking he'd grow out of it, that real life would teach him better, but it didn't," I said quietly. "No." His voice was soft, worn. "It got worse. And I convinced myself staying quiet was protecting you." I reached out and placed my hand on his knee. "Daniel, you were trying to keep peace. I understand why you stayed quiet." He shook his head. "Peace shouldn't cost you your dignity." The truth of it settled deep. For years, I had carried that cost alone. And for years, he had watched me carry it, hoping the burden would lighten on its own. I squeezed his hand. We both stayed quiet. "But that ends now." Daniel exhaled. A long, steady release. "Then we face what's coming together." I nodded, feeling something in me steady. Together. They arrived just after 6 quick, sharp knocks, followed by an impatient double press of the doorbell. Daniel opened the door before they could jab it again. Jason stepped in first. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Amber followed close behind, arms crossed, chin lifted in the way she used when she wanted control of a room. "We need to talk," Jason said, his voice already raised. "This has gotten out of hand," Amber added. "We deserve an explanation." I stood by the dining table where 7 folders were arranged in a straight, deliberate line. Bank statements, messages, loan confirmations, 7 years of quiet support under the warm glow of our chandelier. "You'll have an explanation," I said. "Sit." Jason hesitated at the command in my voice. Amber clearly didn't like following directions, but she took a seat. Daniel pulled a chair out for me. Though I chose to remain standing, Jason looked at the papers. "What is all this?" 7 years, I said. 7 years of financial support. I thought it was time we reviewed it together. Amber scoffed. "If this is about the transfer, it's about everything." I opened the first folder and slid it toward Jason. "Payments for your student loans, your car repairs, the rent shortages you never mentioned." His expression broke. "Mom, I told you I'd pay you back someday. You did. And I believed you." I opened the next folder and placed it in front of Amber. Messages asking for help with utilities, groceries, closing costs, reminders that we were late. Her cheeks flushed. "We were under pressure. So were we." I replied, "But I never treated you like a bill." Jason looked between us, confusion and guilt warring on his face. "Why now?" "Because last night," I said, "you mouthed trash belongs outside. And the people smirking with you have been using my support to stay afloat." Amber opened her mouth, but Daniel stepped forward. "We heard it from someone who was there. Someone who overheard much more than you realize." Jason lowered his eyes. "Mom, I didn't mean you did," I said gently. "But even if you hadn't, this reckoning was coming. The support ends, the expectation ends, the disrespect ends." Amber's arms tightened across her chest. "So you're abandoning us, no?" I said. "I'm letting you stand on your own." Jason's breath shook. "I didn't know it had gotten this far." I closed the last folder. "Now you do. The truth lay across the table plain, undeniable, and finally spoken aloud. Chapter 8. The Cracks in Their Perfect House. 381. Words Jason and Amber left abruptly. No goodbye. No attempt at grace. Just the sharp rustle of coats and the slam of their car door. Daniel locked the front door, but I already knew the real noise would begin once they reached the Hemsworths' house. And it didn't take long. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a single message from Jason's mom. "Can we talk again?" Alone. 15 minutes later, he was back without Amber, without the bravado. His shoulders sagged as he stepped inside, eyes red, expression stripped of everything but regret. Daniel gave him space and moved toward the kitchen. Jason sat at the edge of the sofa. I talked to Amber's parents. He said, voice shaking. It blew up. I stayed quiet. They're in real trouble. He continued, credit cards maxed out. A home equity loan they never paid down. They've been using part of your support just to stay ahead of interest. Daniel muttered from the hallway. Of course. Jason kept talking, words tumbling out. They never told Amber. They told her not to worry, that they were managing it. They said your monthly help was something they could always count on. I asked softly, did you know they were depending on me? Jason shook his head, a humorless, broken laugh escaping him. I thought they were teaching us how to manage money. Turns out they were using us and you to cover holes they didn't want anyone to see. He swallowed hard, then repeated something he clearly hated saying. Amber's mother said you lived to feel needed, that you'd never stop helping because you wanted to be thanked. His voice dropped to almost nothing. I didn't realize how much I believed them until tonight. The room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, Jason looked up, eyes shining with something painfully clear. Mom, I let them tell me who you were. I let them shape the way I saw you, and I never questioned it. Daniel stepped forward. Voice steady, then start questioning it now. Jason nodded weakly, rubbing the back of his neck. Their whole world is about to fall apart. I met his eyes. It was already cracking. Jason, you're just seeing the fractures now. He didn't argue, didn't defend them. He simply sat there, watching the truth settle quiet. Undeniable as the shining image of the Hemsworths' perfect house finally came undone. Jason didn't leave right away. He sat on the sofa with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the truth he'd uncovered was too heavy to look at directly. Daniel stayed in the kitchen, giving him space but close enough that his quiet presence acted like support beams holding up the room. When Jason finally lifted his head, something in his expression had changed. He wasn't my son asking for help. He was a grown man realizing what he had allowed. Mom, he said, voice cracking. I don't know how to face what I've done, or what I let them do. I folded my hands in my lap. Start with honesty, with yourself. He nodded, swallowing hard. I thought Amber's family had everything figured out. They always talked like experts about money, careers, what a proper household looks like. I wanted to fit in. I liked how confident they sounded. His voice thinned. I didn't see the cracks. Or I didn't want to. Daniel stepped into the room then, leaning against the doorway. You weren't encouraged to see them, he said gently. You were encouraged to see us as the problem. Jason flinched at the truth. They made me believe you were old-fashioned, too soft, that you didn't understand real stability. I repeated things they said. I can't believe I did that to you. Shame pulled at every word. It was hurtful, I answered honestly. But you're owning it now. That matters. Jason ran a hand over his face. I let them rewrite who you were. I let them make me think your support was weakness, not love. I let them convince me I was doing you a favor by treating you like you needed guidance. You let their version of you become your truth, I said softly, but you can choose differently now. He looked up, eyes glassy but clearer than they had been in years. I want to fix this. I want to take responsibility for real this time. You can start, I said, by standing on your own. No more monthly support. No more stories told for you. Jason didn't argue. He simply nodded a slow, deliberate acceptance. I'll do it, he whispered. I need to. And in that moment, I saw my son take his first real step out of the shadow he'd been living under for far too long. Jason returned the next evening just as the sun slipped behind the trees, leaving the porch washed in a soft amber glow. This time, he didn't storm in or pound on the door. He tapped once quiet, almost apologetic, and waited. Daniel opened it for him, stepping aside with a calm that held no anger, only resolve. Jason walked in slowly, as if unsure he still belonged in the space he once took for granted. He stopped in front of me, hands clasped, shoulders low. Mom, he said, voice thin but steady. I owe you a real apology. I folded my hands. I'm listening. He took a breath. I let them shape how I saw you. I let them talk about you like you were weak or outdated or someone to be corrected, and I didn't defend you not once. I wanted to belong to their world so badly that I stopped seeing who you really were. His voice wavered. I'm ashamed of it. Daniel stepped forward, arms crossed. And she paid the price. Jason nodded, eyes falling. I know. Every time I didn't speak up. Every time I chose comfort over respect. I'm sorry. I let the quiet settle not as punishment, but as acknowledgement. When I finally spoke, my voice was even. I forgive you, Jason, but we're not going back to how things were. He looked up, and in his eyes was something new, acceptance. I figured, he said softly, and I'm not asking for that. No more monthly support, I said gently. No more rescuing. No more letting anyone else define your parents. He swallowed, but didn't look away. I want to earn your trust again. Not with promises, with how I live. Daniel rested a hand on my shoulder. Standing on your own is the first step. Jason nodded slowly, as if stepping into a life he should have begun years ago. I will, he whispered. He left a few minutes later, shoulders squared lighter, but also steadier. When the door clicked shut, Daniel sat beside me and let out a long breath. You did right, he said. For the first time in a long time, I answered, leaning into him. I feel like I finally drew the line I should have drawn years ago, and in that quiet, I understood something simple. Peace doesn't come from staying silent. It comes from choosing yourself.